When they told me I was being demoted to learn some humility, I didn't argue. I just smiled, thanked them for the opportunity, and walked out of that glass office with my head held high. What they didn't know was that I'd already learned my lesson, just not the one they thought I'd been working at Wexler & Gray, a mid-sized marketing firm in Chicago, for 7 years. I wasn't a loud person, but I was reliable. I built relationships with clients, handled crises quietly, and stayed late when everyone else went home. People used to come to me when things went wrong. Then one day, we got a new director, Marcus Hale, the kind of man who believed authority was a performance. Expensive suits, loud meetings, constant praise for innovation while taking credit for other people's ideas. The type who smiled only when someone else was uncomfortable. I tried to stay out of his way. But that's hard when your work keeps standing out. After a few months, I started noticing changes. My reports were being reassigned. Emails with my name on them were suddenly team efforts. And one morning, I found out through an internal memo that someone else was being introduced to my top client, a client I'd brought in myself 2 years earlier. When I asked Marcus about it, he leaned back in his chair and said, "You've been doing great work, Evelyn, but I think it's time you learned how to be a better team player." A week later, I was officially demoted to a junior position. My title gone, my responsibilities cut in half, and my office replaced with a desk near the copier. Everyone whispered about it, pretending not to stare. Some pitied me, others smirked. I remember the sound of that copier. The same click, click, click every time it started, echoing like a reminder of how small they thought I was. But what they didn't realize was that every single client they depended on still trusted me. Not Marcus, not the new managers, me. And while they were busy teaching me a lesson, I was already planning mine. After my demotion, my days started earlier and ended later. I was no longer invited to client meetings or strategy calls. My tasks were simple: update reports, send follow-up emails, and prepare notes for people who used to ask me for help. At first, it hurt more than I wanted to admit. I'd worked my way up from an unpaid intern to a senior account manager. I'd survived budget cuts, long nights, impossible deadlines, only to be stripped of everything by a man who barely knew my name 6 months ago. But the truth was, I wasn't angry. Not yet. I was tired. Tired of proving my worth to people who only noticed when something went wrong. There's something about humiliation that changes how you see things. You stop trying to be part of the room that never respected you. You start watching, listening, learning what really matters. From my small desk near the copier, I could see everything. The way Marcus strutted through the office like a politician, how the newer employees tried to impress him with half-baked ideas, how clients were starting to grow restless with delays and missed details. My old clients, the ones I'd nurtured for years, still emailed me sometimes. "Hey Evelyn, just checking in. Are you still on our account?" I'd reply politely, "Not officially anymore, but if you need help, I'm always here." They'd usually respond with a sigh I could almost hear through the screen. "That's a shame. Things don't feel the same without you." That's when I realized something. Marcus didn't just demote me. He disconnected the company from the very people who kept it alive. One Friday afternoon, I stayed late to finish a spreadsheet. Most of the office had already gone home. The city outside was dim and quiet. That strange hour between work and weekend when the world feels paused. Marcus came out of his office, jacket slung over his shoulder, and stopped by my desk. "Still here, Evelyn? You know, sometimes I worry you don't know when to stop working." I forced a smile. "Old habits," he laughed softly. "Well, don't burn yourself out. You've got to pace yourself at your new level." That last part lingered. Your new level. It wasn't what he said. It was how he said it, like a reminder that he'd won. When he walked away, I stared at the screen until the numbers blurred. Then I closed my laptop and whispered to myself, "You'll regret that, Marcus." The next few weeks, I started paying attention to which clients complained the most. I made notes, their frustrations, their missed deadlines, the tone of their messages. I knew their projects inside out, and I could see exactly where Marcus's leadership was failing them. Then, one night while scrolling through LinkedIn, I got a message from an old contact, Julia Monroe. She was a regional manager at another agency. We'd met years ago at a conference and kept in touch loosely over time. "Evelyn, I heard you're not with Wexler anymore. Is that true?" I paused before replying. "Still technically there. Just in a different role." She sent another message right away. That's their loss. If you ever think of moving on, we're expanding our client team. Let's talk. For the first time in months, I smiled. It wasn't about leaving, not yet. It was about knowing that I had options. At home, my husband Daniel noticed the change. He'd been patient through it all, even when I came home quiet and withdrawn. One night, he found me sitting at the kitchen table, scrolling through client emails. He poured me a cup of tea and asked softly, "Still thinking about work?" I nodded. I can't stop. They treated me like I was disposable, but they don't even realize how fragile their situation is. Daniel leaned against the counter. "So, what are you going to do about it?" I looked at him and said, "I'm not sure yet, but I'm done letting them decide my value." He smiled, a quiet, proud kind of smile, and said, "Then whatever you do next, make it count." From that night on, I started preparing. I didn't tell anyone. I didn't gossip or complain. I simply worked quietly, deliberately, and with purpose. I built a folder on my personal drive labeled Future Plans. Inside, I stored everything I'd ever done for my top clients, strategies, campaign frameworks, designs, analytics, and even communication templates. I wasn't stealing anything. I was taking my work, the work I had created. I knew it wouldn't be long before Marcus's arrogance would catch up to him. And when that moment came, I wanted to be ready, not to destroy them, but to remind them what they lost when they underestimated me. By the time winter rolled in, Wexler and Gray's biggest client, Stonewell Industries, was quietly reconsidering their contract. I knew because their marketing director, Laura, called me personally one afternoon. "Evelyn, I just wanted your opinion. Things have been different lately. Do you think your team will turn things around?" There was a long pause before I answered. "I hope so, Laura, but if they don't, you know where to find me." She chuckled softly, like she understood more than I said. "Maybe I do." That night, as I closed my laptop, I realized something had shifted. I wasn't the one on the defensive anymore. I was just waiting, calmly, patiently, for the game to turn. By January, I had learned to live with my new desk near the copier. The noise no longer bothered me. It became a kind of rhythm, the steady beat beneath my silence. Every click, every print, every pause felt like a reminder that time was moving, and patience was my strongest weapon. Marcus, on the other hand, was changing. The confident grin that once lit up his face had started to fade. He was still charming, still loud in meetings, but the cracks were showing. Clients were calling more often. The tone in his voice when he said, "We're handling it," sounded less certain. I noticed his growing frustration one Monday morning. He came out of his office holding a printed email, one of mine ironically. He dropped it on my desk and said, "Did you send this follow-up to Stonewell?" I looked up calmly. Yes, they requested the updated timeline. His jaw tightened. "Next time, let me handle it." "You're not assigned to them anymore." I nodded, pretending to agree. But I also saw what he didn't say. He needed me to keep that client calm, yet he couldn't admit it. That was the moment I knew his downfall wasn't going to come from me attacking him. It would come from him trying to protect his ego. A few days later, an internal memo went out. Wexler and Gray was preparing for a quarterly review. This meant numbers, client reports, and retention rates. It was the kind of event that made or broke managers. I knew Marcus's team was struggling. 2 of his junior associates were already whispering about late deliverables. Another had accidentally sent a draft proposal to the wrong client. I didn't have to sabotage anything. Their mistakes were doing the work for me. Still, I stayed quiet, helpful, kind. If Marcus asked for data, I sent it right away. If someone needed help formatting a report, I offered. I was invisible but indispensable, the perfect position to watch everything crumble. One Friday afternoon, I stayed after hours again. The office was empty except for the faint hum of the city outside. I walked past Marcus's glass office and noticed something. He'd left his screen unlocked. His inbox was open. For a moment, I hesitated. I wasn't there to snoop. But then I saw the subject line of one email. Urgent. Stonewell project delay. Requesting explanation. My heart sank. But I couldn't help reading the first line. Marcus, we're concerned about the missed deadline and lack of communication from your end. I closed the screen immediately. I didn't need to read more. I already knew where things were heading. The following week, rumors started spreading. Stonewell was threatening to pull their contract. the firm's largest one. Without it, Wexler and Gray would lose nearly 40% of its revenue. Marcus was frantic. He called emergency meetings, pointed fingers, demanded long hours. He even started micromanaging people who barely interacted with him before. Everyone felt the tension. One afternoon, he stopped by my desk again. "Evelyn, I need you to organize all past campaign data for Stonewell. Quickly." "Of course," I said softly. As he walked away, I could almost feel the desperation in his steps. What he didn't realize was that I already had all that data, organized neatly on my personal drive, ready for something else entirely. That night, I got another message from Julia, the contact from the other agency. "Still surviving at Wexler?" I replied, barely. "Things are falling apart," she answered almost instantly. "Our leadership wants to expand into Chicago. We need someone with your experience, someone who knows the market and has client trust. Interested?" I stared at the message for a long time. It wasn't just a job offer. It was a lifeline, and, unknowingly, the first step in Marcus's undoing. I met with Julia 2 days later at a quiet cafe near the river. It was cold, and the windows fogged up as people talked over their coffee. She smiled when she saw me, the kind of smile that felt genuine. We talked for nearly 2 hours, about the industry, leadership styles, and everything that had gone wrong at Wexler. She listened carefully, nodding, and finally said, "We're looking for someone to lead our Chicago accounts. You'd be in charge of onboarding clients, including some who might not be happy where they are." The way she said it was subtle, but clear. She knew Stonewell was unhappy. She knew the timing was right. I didn't say yes immediately. But inside, I already knew my answer. Back at Wexler, the atmosphere grew heavier by the day. Marcus was losing his grip. Staff turnover increased. Projects piled up. The energy that once filled the office had turned into quiet dread. Then, one morning, an email came through that changed everything. "Meeting request, Stonewell Industries." It was addressed to Marcus, copied to me. The message read, "We'd like to schedule a discussion about next quarter's plans. Evelyn, please join as well." He came storming to my desk minutes later. "Did you ask them to include you?" I looked him straight in the eyes. "No, Marcus. They requested it." He clenched his jaw, but he couldn't refuse. Stonewell was too important. The meeting was held online. Marcus started with his usual corporate tone, confident, polished. But Laura, Stonewell's marketing director, wasn't in the mood for small talk. "Marcus," she said firmly, "we're disappointed. The last campaign underperformed. Deadlines were missed. Communication was slow. We trusted your leadership." He fumbled through excuses, blaming team restructuring and unforeseen challenges. I stayed silent, watching. Then Laura turned to me. "Evelyn, I assume you're still with Wexler?" I nodded. "Yes, though not in a management role anymore." She frowned. "That's unfortunate. You always delivered what you promised." Marcus shifted in his seat. "Evelyn's still part of the team, but she's, focusing on internal support." Laura looked unimpressed. "Well, maybe she should be leading again." The call ended awkwardly. Marcus looked furious, but he couldn't say anything in front of them. Afterward, he called me into his office. He didn't sit down. "You went behind my back." "No," I said quietly. "I did my job." They reached out to me. His face turned red. "Don't play innocent, Evelyn. You're trying to embarrass me." I met his gaze. "I don't need to try." From that day, he made my life harder. He piled meaningless work on my desk, excluded me from team updates, and corrected my reports in front of others just to humiliate me. But I didn't react. I just smiled, thanked him, and kept doing my work, because by then Julia had already sent me the official offer letter, and this time I wasn't leaving quietly. A week passed before Noah heard from Emma again. He had sent her a message, just a simple, "I hope you're okay," but she didn't reply. Then, one cold evening, a letter arrived, not through text. Not through email, a handwritten letter, sealed in the same floral envelope she used to write with in college. His hands trembled as he opened it. Inside, her words flowed with the same softness as her voice once did. "Noah, I didn't leave because I stopped loving you. I left because I realized how much I was depending on your love to feel whole. And that wasn't fair to you, or to me." She explained how lost she'd been, how her anxiety and guilt made her push him away every time things got too close. "I thought space would heal me," she wrote, but it only made me understand how much your presence grounded me. You weren't the problem. My fear was, Noah read the letter 3 times. Each word pulled him between anger and understanding. She hadn't betrayed him, she had been fighting her own battles silently. He finally realized the truth. Sometimes, people disappear not because they want to leave you, but because they're trying to find themselves. And some never find their way back. He folded the letter gently, placed it in the box where he kept their old photographs, and whispered to himself, maybe this time, I'll let the memory stay, but I'll stop waiting for her return. The days after Emma's letter felt quieter than usual. Not empty, just still. For the first time in a long while, Noah didn't reach for his phone, expecting her name to light up the screen. He started walking again, the same route they used to take near the river. The winter air was sharp, but it cleared his mind. He noticed how the trees had lost their leaves, how everything looked bare yet peaceful, like life was reminding him that even endings could be gentle. He met old friends he hadn't seen in months. He laughed without forcing it. He began to read again, something he'd stopped doing when everything was about her. The pain didn't vanish, but it softened. Sometimes late at night, he'd still think about her. The way she smiled when she talked about her dreams. The sound of her laugh echoing down his apartment hall. But instead of breaking him, those memories started to feel like quiet reminders that love doesn't always stay, but it can still shape who you become. One evening, as the sun dipped below the city skyline, Noah whispered to himself, she was a chapter I'll always keep, but not the story I'll stay trapped in. He finally smiled, not because he'd forgotten her, but because he'd forgiven both of them. It had been almost 2 months since Noah last heard from Emma. Life was slowly taking shape again. Work was steady. The silence at home had turned into peace instead of loneliness, and he was learning how to live without expecting her to return. Then, one quiet Sunday morning, his phone buzzed. The screen showed a name he hadn't seen in weeks. Emma. For a moment, Noah just stared at it. His chest tightened, his mind raced. A part of him wanted to ignore it. Another part wanted to open it immediately. Finally, curiosity and something softer pushed him to read it. Hi, Noah. I hope you're doing okay. I know this message might surprise you. I've been meaning to write for a while, but I didn't know what to say. I just wanted to thank you for how you handled everything. I've realized a lot about myself since then. No apology. No request to come back. Just honesty, gentle and calm. Noah sat in silence, rereading the message. His hands trembled slightly, not from sadness, but from the weight of what those few lines meant. It wasn't closure she was offering. It was acknowledgement. He typed a reply, then deleted it. Started again, deleted it once more. After a few minutes, he finally wrote, Thank you, Emma. I'm glad you reached out. I'm doing okay. I hope you are too. He hit send. That was it. No long speeches. No reopening old wounds. Just 2 people who had loved deeply, hurt each other, and learned something real in the process. That night, Noah looked out the window. The city lights flickered in the distance, and he realized something. Peace doesn't come when everything is fixed. It comes when you stop needing answers. A week passed after Emma's message, and Noah felt something he hadn't in a long time. Stillness. Not the heavy kind that came from loneliness, but the peaceful kind that comes after a storm. Every morning, he'd wake up early, make his coffee, and sit by the window before starting work. The city always moved fast outside, but he didn't rush anymore. There was calm in small routines, the sound of the kettle, the smell of fresh coffee, the quiet moments before the world fully woke up. Sometimes his thoughts wandered back to Emma, not with pain, but with understanding. He saw now that not every love story ends in togetherness. Some end in growth. Some people come into your life to teach you how to love, and others to teach you how to let go. Emma had done both. One afternoon, while leaving work, he passed by the small park where he and Emma used to sit during lunch breaks. The bench was empty, sunlight falling through the trees, and for a second, he almost expected her to be there. He smiled instead, not out of sadness, out of gratitude. That evening, Noah met his friend David for dinner. They hadn't seen each other in a while, and David could immediately tell something had changed. You seem lighter, he said. Maybe I am, Noah replied, smiling softly. I stopped trying to control what I can't keep. David nodded. That's the hardest thing to learn. Noah looked out the restaurant window, watching people hurry by. Strangers with their own stories, their own heartbreaks, their own lessons waiting to unfold. For the first time, he didn't wish things had gone differently. He didn't want to rewrite the past. Every memory, every mistake, every quiet moment alone, it had shaped him into someone stronger, gentler, and more aware of what real love means. Before bed that night, he wrote a note in his journal. I finally understand. Love isn't about holding on. It's about giving someone the freedom to leave and still wishing them peace when they do. He closed the notebook, turned off the light, and lay in bed listening to the faint sound of rain outside. There was no ache in his chest, no longing for what was gone, just a quiet strength, the kind that comes from surviving something that once felt impossible. Spring came early that year. The city, once gray and tired, was waking up. Trees lined the streets in soft green, and people smiled more as if they too were starting over. Noah felt that same shift inside himself. He wasn't searching for anything now. Not closure, not love, not answers. Just balance. His life had settled into something peaceful. Mornings with coffee and sunlight. Afternoons filled with work he cared about. Evenings spent walking, reading, or calling his parents. For the first time in years, he felt grounded, content with simple things. One Saturday, he joined a small community workshop for writers, something he'd always wanted to do but never made time for. It was held in a quiet bookstore downtown. The smell of old paper filled the air, and a handful of people sat in a circle, notebooks open. That's where he met Clara. She wasn't loud or overly charming. She spoke softly, but her words carried a quiet confidence. The kind of presence that didn't demand attention but naturally drew it. During introductions, she mentioned she was a social worker who wrote stories on weekends. When it was Noah's turn, he hesitated. I'm just learning to put my thoughts into words, he said, smiling awkwardly. Clara smiled back. That's how all good stories start. They ended up talking after the session. About writing, about people, about how strange it is that pain often becomes art. It wasn't romantic, not right away. It was easy. Two people talking like old friends who had met too late, but just in time. Weeks passed. They kept meeting at the workshop, then for coffee, then for long walks by the river. Noah didn't feel the rush he used to, that desperate need to make someone stay. Instead, he felt calm. He was no longer looking for love to heal him. He was simply sharing his healed self. One evening, as the sun set over the city skyline, Clara turned to him and said, You know, you look like someone who's been through a lot, but learned from it. Noah smiled, watching the light fade into gold. Yeah, I used to think losing something meant failing. But now I see it's just life. Teaching us how to begin again, she nodded. Then maybe we both needed a few endings to get here. As they walked together in quiet, Noah felt something stir, not the old ache of longing, but a soft warmth, steady and real. He didn't know where it would go, and that didn't scare him anymore, because he'd learned that love isn't always a storm. Sometimes it's just two people walking side by side, not needing to rush, just grateful to have found their way to the same path. And for Noah, that was enough.